This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. We begin with the face-off between the U.S. and Iran. Iranian officials continue to threaten retaliation, and President Donald Trump has double-dared them to take action against America. This morning, he tweeted, "Iran will never have a nuclear weapon." Mark Martin joins us now with more. Mark.
Heather, part of Iran's tributes to top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani involved his casket being paraded through the streets of Tehran Monday in a mass ceremony. From Baghdad to Beirut, Iran and its allies are promising revenge and retaliation. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah vowed his terror group can now target U.S. troops in the region. Iran has also threatened to attack Israeli cities. The Shiite-dominated Iraqi parliament passed a non-binding resolution to kick the U.S. out of Iraq, while in Tehran, Iran announced it will no longer comply with the restrictions of the 2015 nuclear agreement. President Trump threatens sanctions against Iraq if they force U.S. troops out. Trump says the U.S. will strike back in case of any Iranian retaliation, and he's sending an additional 3,500 troops to the region and deploying missiles at embassy and U.S. bases. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the strike on Soleimani put America at greater risk, and she's calling for a House vote to limit the president's military actions regarding Iran. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg confirmed on Monday that the military alliance suspended a training mission for soldiers in the Iraqi army. When asked about the U.S. airstrike, Stoltenberg offered this.
This is a U.S. decision. It is not a decision taken by neither the global coalition nor NATO, but all allies are concerned about Iran's destabilizing activities in the region, Iran's support to different terrorist groups, and of course we are extremely concerned about the recent attacks we have seen against civilian energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, or against coalition bases in Iraq, bases which are important for our efforts to fight international terrorism in Iraq and in Syria.
Stoltenberg said several U.S. officials explained the rationale behind the U.S. decision to kill Soleimani, but he did not provide details. Heather, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. And we are joined now by Alireza Nader, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, who focuses on Iran and U.S. policy in the Middle East. Mr. Nader, thanks so much for joining us. As you have noted, Iran has several retaliatory options right now, including terrorist attacks in the Middle East and even the U.S. attacking U.S. forces, kidnapping diplomats. What options do you think that leadership might be leaning towards at this time?
The regime in Iran likes to work through proxies. It doesn't want to attack the United States directly. And I think the most possible or plausible scenario is for Iraqi Shia militias to continue attacking U.S. bases. But this is a regime that has a pattern of conducting attacks against American interests all over the world. The regime has conducted attacks against the United States in Saudi Arabia, for example, in Lebanon in the 80s. It has conducted terrorist attacks against Israeli targets in Argentina, even. And I would even say that the United States itself, the homeland, is at risk because the regime has had terror plots, major terror plots. For example, the plot to kill the Saudi ambassador and Washington, D.C. itself. So I wouldn't put anything past the Islamic Republic right now. I think they're going to be very cautious because they've seen that the United States will retaliate and retaliate harshly. The president's decision to kill Soleimani shows that he means business, and they're very well aware of that as well.
Such an interesting time. I want to ask you, the foreign minister of Iran, Javad Zarif, posted video, which really so many people have seen, enormous crowds coming out for the funeral procession for Soleimani. And he commented, "Have you ever seen such a sea of humanity in your life?" And you responded on social media, "Hitler, Stalin, and the North Korean regimes were also good at organizing mass rallies." Do you think Iran significantly gains with PR moves like this?
Sure, because its sympathizers in the West and specific media in the Western United States have claimed that this shows Iranians are rallying around the flag. But this is a totalitarian regime. It's a police state. It makes people come into the streets. It threatens those who don't. Even when I was a kid living in Iran, we were made to chant in support of the regime. And it was mandatory. If you don't do it, you could potentially get harmed. So I'm not convinced whatsoever by these crowds. I think the regime is forcing people to come into the streets, and it's exaggerating the numbers as well.
All right. And as you know, there was just an uprising by the Iranian people in November, and you have suggested in an op-ed piece that the U.S. should directly aid Iranian opposition forces. How likely do you think it is that the regime will collapse or be overthrown by its people?
This is a very tough regime. It's one of the most violent regimes on earth. In November, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei commanded his security forces to kill people who were protesting, to shoot them in the head and the heart, according to very credible reports we have. And so this regime is not going to go down easily. I think it's vulnerable. The economy is crashing in Iran. The regime is facing major rebellion across the Middle East. But I think the United States needs to do much more in order, A, to protect its national security, and ultimately facilitate an Iran that's more open and democratic and takes the interests of its people at heart. Ultimately, the Iranian people have to make changes within Iran. This is not America's job, but there are things the United States can do to both protect its interests and really support the democratic aspirations of the Iranian people.
All right. And just briefly, I want to ask you, there's a real possibility that the 5,000 U.S. troops in Iraq will be forced to leave. How do you see that playing out if indeed that does happen?
Well, the Iraqi parliament just passed a non-binding resolution demanding that the U.S. leave. But if American forces leave from Iraq, that leaves Iraq basically vulnerable to becoming a complete dependency of the Islamic Republic in Iran. And Iraq could come under sanctions itself. I think the United States does not essentially need to be in Iraq forever. It has many bases across the Middle East, but it's important for the U.S. to be there in order to check the regime in Iran's expansionist policies. I don't necessarily think that it's a given the U.S. will depart Iraq. I think a lot of Iraqi politicians and much of the public is opposed to that because they're afraid of Iranian hegemony, basically.
All right, so much at play right now. Alireza Nader, thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thank you for having me.
Well, a key military base used by U.S. counter-terror forces was overrun on Sunday in Kenya, leaving 3 Americans dead. Al-Shabaab extremists linked to al-Qaeda have claimed responsibility for the attack on the Manda Bay airfield. U.S. and Kenyan authorities say several U.S. aircraft and vehicles were destroyed. The 3 Americans killed were Department of Defense personnel. Officials say 5 extremists were killed in retaliation. It was the terror group's first attack against U.S. forces in the East African country. Australia's government says that it will pay, quote, whatever it takes to help communities recover from the deadly wildfires ravaging that country. The fires have killed at least 25 people and destroyed about 2,000 homes. More than 135 bushfires are still burning across New South Wales, Australia's most populous state. That includes almost 70 that are uncontained. Residents in some communities were let back today to assess damages.
Today's just been kind of a relief, you know, but I don't know. Still a bit rattled as to what's going on, and in all honesty, I couldn't thank the Rural Fire Service for what they've done. Just an incredible job. Same as the local boys that have all pulled together and fought so hard to, you know, to do their best to save what they can. Everyone's, you know, no one's been left behind. Everyone's been accounted for. Everyone's been checked.
The total cost of the fires is expected to be well into the billions of dollars. Well, meanwhile, here in the U.S., heavy rain is not letting up in some parts of the country. Drone footage out of Florida shows major damage yesterday after severe storms ripped through the central part of the state. The National Weather Service says there were reports of 2 tornadoes passing through. In the northwestern part of the country, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour brought down trees and knocked out power. Forecasters say the weather pattern will remain active as several storms move across the country, bringing flooding and heavy snow. Hundreds of demonstrators joined by elected officials walked across the Brooklyn Bridge yesterday in a solidarity march against anti-Semitism and all acts of hate. New York's Jewish community organized the No Hate, No Fear March. It comes following recent anti-Semitic acts of violence, including a knife attack at a Hanukkah celebration north of New York City that left 5 people wounded, and a fatal shootout at a kosher grocery in Jersey City. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo gave a speech before the march announcing a grant program that gives funding to improve security. He also said a new state hotline is available for people to call if they experience discrimination.
I'm heartened to see this amazing show of support and solidarity. Literally over 10,000 people have shown up to show support and love for the Jewish community, and that's New York at her best. And it's fitting, because what has happened in Brooklyn, what has happened in Muncie, New York, was an attack on every New Yorker. And every New Yorker has felt the pain. Discrimination, racism, anti-Semitism is repugnant to every value that New Yorkers hold dear, and it's repugnant to every value that this country represents. Racism and anti-Semitism is anti-American, and we have to remember that.
In other news, the United Methodist Church is expected to split into 2 denominations over same-sex marriage. Church leaders are calling the proposal a different form of reconciliation. It states the undersigned, in recognition of the regional contexts and divergent points of view within the global United Methodist Church, propose separation as a faithful step with the possibility of continued cooperation around matters of shared interest. Church members have been at odds for years over the issue, with some members in the U.S. leading the call for full inclusion for LGBTQ people. Their plan was struck down last year with votes from conservative members in the U.S., Africa, and the Philippines. Coming up, what difference might evangelical voters make in the 2020 election?
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
President Trump targeted evangelical voters at a Miami campaign rally over the weekend. He launched his new Evangelicals for Trump 2020 initiative at a Latino megachurch, El Rey Jesus, and he touted his record in some key areas: religious liberty, Israel, abortion, and federal judges. Many believe that the president's choice of a Spanish megachurch as his venue is an attempt to reach Latino evangelicals in particular. They're considered an important swing vote in November's election. And Reverend Tony Suarez is one of the president's faith advisors. He attended the rally, and he joins us now via Skype. Reverend Tony, thank you so much for joining us. You were at the rally. Give us a quick snapshot. What was the mood like? What did the president say that you think connected with the people there?
Well, I think, like Reverend Rodriguez said, it was a brilliant move that President Trump would begin 2020 at a Latino church. One of the things that I appreciated is that it wasn't billed as a Latino event. It was billed as an evangelical event, but it just so happened to be in one of the largest Hispanic churches in the country. And there was worship, there was praise, there was prayer, declarations, prophecies. It was just a wonderful time expressing our Christianity and our support for President Trump. 5,000 in the building, several thousand outside. It was a very encouraging afternoon and evening with the president.
Those numbers are astounding. You are predicting that more Latinos overall will vote for the president in 2020. What do you think will encourage that vote?
Well, I don't think the Democrats have given another choice. President Trump enjoyed a large number of Latino voters in 2016, more than what anyone suspected. And as 2020 rolls around, the Democrats, in my opinion, haven't really done anything to sway the Latino vote. If you look at Joe Biden, Latinos still remember the failed promises of the Obama era. When they promised that immigration reform would get done, Obama was known as the deporter in chief. And those innuendos are attached to Joe Biden. When you look at Mayor Pete and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they just don't offer anything that's very appealing to Latinos. Many Latinos that fled Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba were fleeing communism and socialism. And hearing Bernie Sanders and AOC and their other supporters that tout socialistic ideas brings fear into the heart of Latinos. And so on the flip side, they have President Trump, who defends democracy and freedom of speech, and loves Israel, and that resonates with Latino voters. And I predict he'll have even more Latino voters in 2020 than he did in 2016.
Well, it's such an interesting election. I want to ask you, as you know, not all evangelicals support the president. A recent Christianity Today editorial called for his removal from office, and it talked about what he had asked the president of Ukraine to investigate, also saying that he has, quote, dumbed down the idea of morality in his administration. How have you seen Latino evangelicals respond to this editorial? Do you see it resonating with them?
I have not seen any true Bible-believing evangelicals that support the CT article. I was very disappointed that CT published it. I'm very disappointed that Mark Galley would write such an article, especially on his way out while he enjoys retirement and the rest of us have to sit here and continue talking about his article. But I think it was a noisy minority that spoke up, but it does not resonate with Latino voters. Now, Latino voters do want to see immigration reform get done, but they don't place that blame, as you and I have talked about before. They don't place that blame on this administration. They continue to place that blame on the House that has to bring something viable to the floor to pass and then get to the Senate. So right now, I see more disappointment with Latino voters when it comes to the House and the Senate than the presidential administration.
All right, and we just have about 30 seconds left, but I want to ask you, when you think about the issues that are important to Latino evangelicals in 2020, what comes to mind?
The economy, education, continued criminal justice reform, and immigration reform, which includes border security.
All right, Reverend Tony Suarez, it's going to be an interesting year. Thank you for your time right now.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We will be right back after the break.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian shepherd.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Well, there is a big national championship title in college football to be given away in just over a week. And our Mark Martin spoke with FaithWire's Dan Andros about one college football player and team in that game that is still getting attention for a post-game interview following the win after their last game.
LSU and Clemson are set to play in the college football championship game a week from today. However, the faith of Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence has once again gone viral. FaithWire's Dan Andros joins us now to talk about it. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, thank you.
First of all, tell us what he said.
Yeah, so right after the game, Trevor Lawrence, obviously one of the big stars of the game, had a big 67-yard touchdown run. And just played a pretty solid game and obviously got the win. And so right after this, the reporters were talking to them, asking them how they did it. And here's what he said. He said, just the fight of this team. We didn't play great. It didn't look pretty, but we just find a way to get it done. I wouldn't want to do this with anyone else. I have Ephesians 3:20, referring to what was written on his uniform. And it just says, God can do immeasurably more than any of us can because of him within us. And he said, that's just so true. I mean, all of us, me, that's what we did tonight. It ain't us. It's about this program and who we are. And that does come from the top down. This is a program that's got a lot of faith, and they're very open about it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, what kind of reaction was there online?
Well, the reaction was actually really obviously positive for the most part. And at least for our audience and on Twitter and on social media, you see people reacting that, hey, I'm not even, a big Clemson fan, but I've got to respect the faith that Trevor shows and that the coach shows. So a lot of positive reaction, people respecting the faith and appreciative that they're willing to be so open and bold about it on such a big stage.
And like you touched on this a little bit earlier, but this really isn't new for the Clemson team, is it?
No, it's not. And in fact, every time we cover something that they say, one of these stories that we have on Coach Dabo Swinney, it comes from the top from him. Seems to go viral every single time, and it's doing so again in the wake of this victory and ahead of this championship game. And that was a great story. That was when a reporter at the end of last year, at the end of 2018, actually asked him, he said, hey, you're holding up trophies when you're getting these big wins. He said, you're talking about your faith. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because, it was interesting to this reporter that he had faith on his mind in the midst of such a big personal accomplishment. And Coach Swinney said this. He said, that's the easiest question I've had all day. To me, it's just the priorities of my life. I made a decision when I was 16. I grew up in a family where I was taught there was a God, but I didn't really have a relationship with Christ until I was 16. That was a game changer for me. It really has become the foundation of my life. That's what my relationship with Christ did for me. He said it gave me the ability to have a hope and a belief beyond my circumstances. And that's very evident in the things he says, the things he does, the way the program is run. And even Trevor Lawrence, had kind of alluded to that fact that this is who we are as a program, and it's just great to see that this program is being blessed and being faithful at the same time.
Yes, it's great, the platform that the Lord has given them, and God's word does not return void. Well, tell us what's coming up tonight on FaithWire's Faith versus Culture.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about this tragic shooting that happened in White Settlement, Texas, at a church where 2 people, unfortunately, tragically died, but it could have been worse if it wasn't for one of the church deacons of security who actually, prevented and stopped this attack from getting any worse. And so we're going to talk about a responsibility as Christians to forgive, to protect ourselves, a whole lot of topics coming out of that tragic story in Texas.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Dan Andros with FaithWire.
You can catch FaithWire right here on the CBN News Channel tonight at 9:30 Eastern. And after the break, what special celebrations are happening in Bethlehem and how people there are celebrating the birth of Christ.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Well, the holiday season is over for most, but Orthodox Christians are spending the next 2 days celebrating Christmas. Pope Francis today wished the light and the peace of Christ the Savior to a crowd from his window overlooking St. Peter's Square. Meanwhile, those in Bethlehem celebrated their Christmas Eve with a special service. The Eastern Church observes Christmas on January 7th based on the Julian calendar. And that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We hope you have a great day.